Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. As a sort of disclaimer, this episode may include pauses, coughing noises, miscellaneous sounds, and but it will also include one person's observation on reality. So just letting the viewers know to be mindful. Recently, I have focused more on how I have been looking at reality and divided, how I have divided my perception on reality between the known and the unknown. Pretty much, I want to comment on human intelligence and any sort of human perception that comes to a recognition of the unknown, and what happens then if there is something unknown going on here that is similar to a sort of Mysterian school. The most immediate thing that I have noticed in my perception of the world is that one has to make a conclusion on the macrocosmic activity to be able to, in some sense, give purpose to the micro dimensions of reality. So it's as if eyes open in a world. When we wake up in the morning, we log into consciousness now. Based on how we are experiencing this conscious reality, meaning becomes a possibility. There's many types of schools of thought in the world. There's so many different human beings that if each one of them wanted to start an ideological movement, there could be like so many. When I look at human intelligence, the human position, it's like the species reacted to emptiness. There was a point where we existed, but we didn't know we exist. And now the species, at some point in the evolutionary scheme, we realize we do exist. Then we realize that in some sense there is no meaning aside from being, pretty much as creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere reacted to the unbelievable emptiness of the world, and their reaction to the meaninglessness and the emptiness of the world led to the development of language. There's different views on this, of course. I'm trying to find a new way of talking about something that I've spoken about in different ways. Pretty much, let me say it this way, sometimes I'm fascinated by a question, and sometimes I'm fascinated by an answer. For tonight's episode, it's the question of what sort of strategies can an unknown intelligent being have, and the question surpasses how the past is giving us a sort of cultural connotation for meaning. Two of the most important ideas to just be to engage and be aware of as a human being is that there are conscious sectors to perception and there is an unconscious sector to reality. And what that means is life is an ability to view. To observe the world for the first time ever. And it's this sort of unique game where this biological program on the surface of the earth turned itself into a subject. Evolution is really the journey of how nothing became an object became a subject. And the subject became conscious that there was nothing before the object. You know, really, I find that the world's going to take a very different turn in the future. You know, 2022, I think it's one of the last... I'm pretty much considering that in the next 100 years, the human intelligence will realize and will consider that there is an unknown variable to how we are being present as intelligent beings. And what the unknown does to knowledge is that it suggests that there's more and the unobservable awaits. It's like right now we are a known concept and we treat it as if we know where the world is, what the world is. So it's like a known self inside a known world. But what really spirituality, metaphysics, and mysticism is, and just pulling the string of the question, who am I, and reverse engineering into a sort of originality of one's being. You know, it's kind of like dehumanized dimensions gave birth to humanized ones. It's this view that to the human being, when we, for example, let's say we look at turtles, right, a bunch of turtles, or a bunch of fruit flies or something, those animals to us seem to be all turtles, right? Like when we look at frogs or any sort of animal or lesser species, right? To us, they are speaking their language, you know. They have their own means of communication, but to a higher dimensional being, the lesser dimensions seem all to be the same, you know. But to the human being, let's say somebody communicating to their pet and somebody communicating to another human being, when we communicate to the pet, it's as if we're like, all dogs are similar, you know. You know, even fictitiously, we're like, all dogs speak a dog language, you know. But suddenly when we communicate to other human beings, we notice the exact differences between us, you know. And so what it is, it's kind of like, you know, if a frog wanted to speak to a frog, you know, totally two different frogs, you know, but when the human being perceives the frog, they're all the same, right? So what I'm trying to say is that we have access to a view of life where we singularize the meaning of reality, but we also have access to a level of life where it's dualized, and it's kind of like, why is consciousness noticing it is different from the world it is in, right? As certain responses can be given to this in the sense of like physically, in order to move the body. That means the biological existence was a way of the earth moving on itself. To me, creaturehood is still one of the most bizarre geometrical expressions in the world, in the void. Life completely changes for you when you realize that it's more unknown than known, and when we forget this, the arrogance of, the blind ego finds itself in the moment. So anyways, the main idea is in this episode, guys, I will try explaining different concepts, but in reality, I have been silenced by the presence of the unknown in ways that no object or subject has satisfied me yet. When I was younger, life was kind of like a video game, and one is trying to fit into this video game, play the video game. But it's kind of like, imagine a game you've been playing for so long, and after some point you're like, why am I in this game? The same thing occurred to me on an existential level, where, regardless of how the world was, how others were, there was something about how my own sense of being was present to myself that it felt there was a sort of incompleteness. It's kind of like we're these beings that are instantaneously present, but because we experience duality, the singular existence is not satisfied with just being. To me, I have concluded that the cosmos is too big for human eyes and the human brain to contain. And because it is too big for the human brain to contain, the purpose of life is definitely not just exploration of the world only. It's kind of like creatures and what it is, it's kind of like us looking at bees or ants and being like, what is the purpose of these creatures? But we see that those creatures, their purpose is to present something in the environment and to be part of the environment. It's kind of bizarre, because right now, as much as I can choose to separate myself as an entity from the moment and use and associate everything to my name and personality and act as if I am the owner of this moment, on some level, man is being his purpose. That means at some point it's like, what is the purpose of that creature, that creature, that creature, and all of them are just being part of the environment. Kind of like how Alan Watts was like, a tree, apples, and the planet peopled, There is a natural dimension to life where it actually, the less thoughts you have, the more you're kind of like the world is being you and you're being the world. Non-dualism has a value, but it's 1/4 of reality. For me, it's the uniqueness of the privilege of being conscious of dualism, as if reality started from a point where it was all chaos, no meaning, no order, no language, no memory, and then suddenly there was some sort of presentation of order. We we are an organized behavior in an unknown world. And so when we wonder about how we are organized, there's levels of visible clues, but there's also invisible clues. There's moments I have where I close my eyes and I perceive my thoughts, inner realms. Kind of like a film, like memories of my past, visualizations of the future. Then I ask myself, how am I seeing reality? It's kind of like to be consciousness is kind of like in the world, but not of it. It's like we're watching something and we have an ability to choose to express ourselves in it. Due to fear, we have cared for the organizational structure, but it's kind of like the future generations will find themselves being pushed from a life of past meaning, from the known past, we're going towards the unknown future. So, what can an unknown being do? One answer could be that remain unknown. It could be that there is no point and purpose to life, and it's all coming back to the unknown and being the unknown. That means the purpose of conception could be inconceivable, so if conception doesn't attempt to figure out its purpose, it remains inconceivable to itself. Another view could be in some sense that the unknown, what is unknown in one dimension is not unknown, and our unknown experiences of life, for example, they have meaning in another dimension which we don't have access to. It's like a person wondering about emptiness and realizing emptiness is being watched. What human intelligence seems to be is an intelligence that doesn't just want to survive, but it's just that anything that has a potential to happen is like following that potential's design. Human beings are in search of new dimensions, right? And when we get tired of our own mind, we look for other minds. It's sometimes I feel like it's the species daydreaming through language. But if we were to awaken to the true presence of how intelligence is here, we will realize it is dehumanized and it is not the work of a mind. That means reality is not created by a mind. But for the human mind, it's created to itself by its mind. It's kind of like a strategy is required when there is something you can do and you're wondering about how to do it. But when it comes to the unknown, it's kind of like, could there have been always a way that human beings were not human? In some sense, it's like intelligence, raw space. It's like imagine our brain is not the source of intelligence, but our brain is the receiver of intelligence. And really what's going on is it's a multidimensional process of world conversion. Human beings are converting an unknown world into a known linguistic territory, and they're acting in accordance to it. And because the unknown is bizarre, and it could be even beyond humanized states. You know, it's like, how long can the astronaut just, be in outer space? For me, it's potential activation. The meaning of life has come to be this. It's like, imagine someone seeking truth, seeking the soul, wanting to see God or know God and whatnot. And the person comes to realize that it's like a chess piece wanting to know a chess master. But the chess master's hand is made of something different than the chess piece. And so it's kind of like how would I say it? It's kind of like, strangely, through the goggles of faith in the unknown, one can see the divine is their own movement. Man per se, sure, he may perceive something externally moving without his will as divine, right? But at the same time, what is divine is what is moving at the moment at all. For me, I came to this point where I was like, yo, what's my soul? And I realized I'm just being present in an unknown way, and I don't know what is this that is looking through my eyes. And in some sense, could a definition even be enough for it or not? So when a human being realizes they're actually simultaneously in a known, let's say in one side of the coin, they're a known identity, name, shape, backstory, memory, history, all of this. But on the other side of the coin, the world is an unknown event, right? And we are a living relationship with an unknown movement, right? This unknown movement, again, is converted into the knowledge that we are a creature on a rock. What is the actuality of being? And what can man do with the unknown? Because everything that we wait for is in the unknown. Novelty is in the unknown. It's like there's this giant world, and every new idea is an exploration of how it can move. Really, what I'm trying to do in this episode is to let anybody who has had an experience of the unknown, who has met the unknown, I would say to some degree the unknown moving presence of the universal sector. What tends to happen is that man enters a state where he is not a conditional entity experientially, but then when he comes back to their attention focused through their existence, the person has to manage in a conditional reality. So it's kind of like you realize you're an unknown being, and you realize the edge of the world is unknown, but you have to live as a known self in a known world. But where does the fascination of life go? And it's this strange thing where we don't know what we are, and we have to be something. That's the fascinating thing. We're functioning, but we don't know how we are functioning. There are mysteries to reality, to the nature of the mind, even surpassing mind-body dualism, surpassing Vedic thoughts, and eventually reaching a point where really what ancient mystical thought realized, that it's not man that is living through a body, but it is actually, think of it this way, or better yet, Swami Krishnananda says religion is God remembering itself. The ancients had realized that the individual life was a dream to the collective reality of being. There's a way things are happening all at once that are fragmented. Fragmented acceptance of the world is rendered incomplete to some degree. Life is like this command was given to empty space, as if move, and everything is moving. More than we can be believers in snapshot photos of truth, we are in actuality pilots in a sky, in an unknown sky. We're surfers riding a wave that is incomprehensible more than our surfboard. Think of it this way, that we have like a hamster, a bunch of hamsters in a cage, and we have like a bunch of human beings, okay? And so one of the hamsters has realized there is something more than a hamster, has realized there's a human being, that at random times the cage of the world opens and suddenly food is placed out of nowhere. So imagine a hamster noticing that suddenly there's a time where there's no food, and then suddenly there's a time there's a food. The owners kind of put food in the cage for the hamster. Right now, imagine this group of hamsters want to escape or want to know exactly what is going on, and they come to this realization that, okay, how can we know something that is more than ourselves? This is the challenge of humanity when it comes to the unknown. How can a creature that is using a certain way to know itself beyond that way? And really what it is that the behaviors of the species must change. Of course it's changing all the time, but I'm saying it's as if a fascination comes, the hamsters begin doubting the world, and trusting in themselves. Imagine one hamster says to the other hamster, there's no such thing as a higher power bringing us food. This is part of the world. The world brings the food. And another hamster says, no, there is some higher power, and this hand comes out, invisible hand brings the food, inconceivable, hand. And so what I'm trying to say, even if the hamsters had realized there's human beings, even if they could communicate to the human being, they would have to either with complete faith in the higher dimensional entity behave, right, to access the, let's say, higher dimensional realizations, or they have to become content with their limitation. Do you know? It's as if, what do you do when you realize something beyond you? It's like, what do we do? Pretty much life is like, what do we do with our limitations, and what do we do with the limitless? And those people who their limitations have not convinced them that it's impossible, that the limitless is impossible, right? They still wonder about the limitless. But really what it is that there could be so many greater dimensions. I mean, we could just look at the jungle and see how many different creatures with how many different designs, how many different functions, right? So it's as if like we can also fathom that there could be a very vast hierarchy of endless type of interdimensional intelligences out there, but what is the role of humanity, right? For me, it's kind of like to be a conscious human being. It's kind of like to be a soccer player, but you are suddenly found on a field and you don't know what the rules of the game are. You're just in there and you see how other people are playing a game, and it's like out of the void a certain game was decided upon and accepted. Our ancestors had such intense opinions that it became our cultures in modernity. Everything we see when it comes to conscious human behavior has the influence of the past in it. If we were unconsciously living, the person wouldn't even need a psychology. It's like imagine someone, they ask them, "Hey man, what kind of person are you?" And the person's like, "I'm not a person. I'm just energy. I don't even have a personality. I'm just energy moving in the moment." Right? It's kind of like there's different perspectives. Either we're singularizing everything, we're multiplying, or I should say differently, we're singularizing reality. We're seeing everything and it's being concluded as a singularity. Either it's being concluded as a void, or it's being concluded as a duality, or it's being concluded as an infinite movement. What infinity is the end of measurement. When we realize we can't index the whole cosmos to have an accuracy, it's as if like the species is OCD for truth. Somebody in the chat section asks, "What are you talking about in your podcast?" So the intent behind this whole podcast, guys, is that a human being has realized that there's an opportunity to exist for 100 years. And so what is the value of the energy that is here for a limited time? It's kind of like I'm looking at reality and I'm concluding that to advance communication, we must have the intent of expression through it. To me, I'm just a human being talking about how an unknown world has led to knowledge. Really, the strategies of unknown intelligence is to some degree the persona becomes a student, of its own mysterious origin. I remember when I was younger, I would feel kind of the weight of judgment from concepts. Concepts I was familiar to, and also concepts I was unfamiliar, right? But then I realized that every person is just implementing a strategy to their psyche, and most people, their strategies are trying to be past repeats. That means if we right now did a survey of all the people on the planet and we in some sense could see, okay, are their movements new or are their movements repetitive? Like how many human beings in 2022 are doing something that has never been done before, and how many are trying to do things that have been done before perfectly? Right now, for me, there was a fascination of individual ability, but then the fascination of collective ability appeared. The person's not like, okay, I'm just alive once. The person is like, wait a minute, the species has an opportunity to do something it hasn't done before. And how often in the cosmos does a species arise to make decisions and choices? It's like human consciousness is so rare, is so bizarre, that we can never, in some sense, prove that the actuality of a subject through an objective means. What I'm trying to say is that back in the day, people worshipped objects. Like some dude saw a tree and was like, "Yo, God, is that you?" The person thought the object was God, right? And then what happened is, from idol worship, the species goes to language worship. Right now, we're living at a time where everybody's smiling, acting, like civilization is progressing, but deep down, what we're doing is we're clothing an unknown attention in known subjects. And we're living at a time where the species is using an unnatural method to separate itself to separate its mind from its ecosystem. Human consciousness is a glitch in the material universe, but a glitch so bizarre that it's making us question the whole fabric of the game, the texture of the game. It's very fascinating. The human mind has an ability to look at things through multiple contexts. People subconsciously pick this up, But what it is that if we were to truly become conscious of the different contexts of reality, we will recognize that it is true. Our body is a singular existence, but our mind is a multidimensional experiencer. That means it's like we go about through one day of, let's say, physical existence. How many different ways does the mind simulate? How many different ways do angles of perception find you? Right now, the species has not cared for the advancement of its future. I know this through the educational systems. When I look at the educational system, I wonder about why. What's the point of education? The point of education is to explore an unknown world. That's it. We have all been staring at the unknown, and the honest among us have acknowledged it. Most human beings need to have a known template, That's really what it is. Psychology is a sort of the person, that's what culture and conditioning is to some degree. The person's consciousness opens up into a template of personhood. And we think that free will is the person. Every person is watching the moment, and behind their eyes, the moment moves ahead faster and the body follows up with it. Think of somebody who wants to grab a glass of water. They become thirsty, so in their mind they see themselves going to the fridge and opening the fridge and getting a glass, right? Getting a bottle of water or something, right? So the mind lives ahead of us, and then there's some watcher in the presence of the moment that engages that. Now, to become acquainted with truth, it's kind of like this idea where we're like, okay, if there is truth, it has to be. And if there is truth, it's also instantaneous. That means if there is a truth to this world of ours, the truth is an instantaneous being. And if there is truth, then man is choosing his relationship with something that is being here before him. The Buddha called enlightenment a sort of self-realization, and the whole point of self-realization is that before your consciousness, your conscious attention accepted a shape of yourself, there was something happening here, you know. Kind of like the truths behind the let's say those who seek truth, they end up realizing that before their preference on reality, there is a geometry to reality, and this geometry to reality is also intersecting our mind. Like, I don't know how to say it, but you know, Aristotle has this quote. He says it's the sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it, you know. And I am that person who's wondering about the idea of self, and I'm like, okay, if I am to entertain the idea of self, where is the intelligence? Where does it remain? Right? It's like a person fearing a world and wondering where that fear is coming from, and realizing it has to do with some way the world has been accepted. You know, honestly, for this episode, I am kind of like somebody who is tired. But somebody who is tired of endlessly changing conditions. You know, it's kind of like we're all choosing the speed of reality. You know, in the hard problem of consciousness, or even the mysteries that follow this idea where, you know, some people have been like, yo, why is it that I can consciously move my hands in the air, but why can't I consciously, for example, control my heartbeat, you know? Or why is it that we are a biological being right now, or there's biological systems, it's like a majority of what's happening inside the body is automated. And it's like when we look at the unknown, here, I'll draw an axis here. So, I don't have my notepad to show the viewers on screen, but if you were to draw a Cartesian plane, just draw a giant X, you know, or giant plus sign. And the central point of this, let's say two lines are intersecting at the median, there's a central point. So we're like, what can happen to the unknown? There could be an individual dimension, a collective view. There could be the visible and the invisible. So I guess to make this episode, to solidify the geometry for this episode, geometrical structure of the ideology. It's like I'm this person being like, okay, what does the human being do when it notices an unknown, something unknown in the moment? And usually it's a strategy of knowledge. We try to know it in accordance to our past. But if we realize that the past, or the meaning of that the past puts onto the future, started from the unknown, it's as if like these unknown states of potential psychology suddenly solidified into the minds of the earliest human beings. And so really what it is that there could be four types, let me say, four ways to look at the unknown. So anybody listening to me, there's way more, but for now I'm going to speak about four. So what it is that we look at the geometry of the human position. There's the idea of the individual and collective as a duality. So there's in some sense the individual unknown and the collective unknown. In mystical traditions, you know, the individual unknown was the idea of the soul and whatnot, and it led to a non-dual dehumanized singularity. Spirituality is like a moment of being, finally realizing it's being the whole moment. So there's the individual unknown, collective unknown. Now at the same time, we could bring in the idea of visibility, right? And we can say there's things that are visibly unknown, and there's the unknown that is invisible. Right? Like something that I think people don't realize how fascinating it is, but it's that our mind, our sense of self, our idea of ourself, our imagination is a non-physical but non-physical but visible phenomenon. Right, that means I can right now, like, imagine somebody standing at a bus station and they're envisioning, like, you know, I don't know, a statue of Athena, you know, a giant statue of Athena, like in the middle of the square or something, or a giant statue of Athena beside them. Now the other person at the bus stop can't see, as if our minds are invisible to others but visible to us. Right, so the clue of what should an unknown being in the world do is to pay attention to the content of the world and realize that the ability of movement is where meaning is given to the moment. How you move is how your mind happens, right? People don't realize this. Like I've sat down in like these moments of, you know, my own way of doing meditation where I just sit down wherever I am, you know, and I just stay still. It's kind of like a person puts, like, there's a coffee cup here, I put it on the table and I leave it. There's moments where I meditate where I just put my body on the ground, like in a moment, you know. I try to keep my spine straight, but I just sit down, and it's like for a second, it's something is present as the moment that is way more important than how I hold my body or what the physicality has to mean. The privilege of consciousness is to access content of the mind and a person's virtue. Like if we were truly defining karma, let's say we tried to like chart out, map out karma, different karmic ways that moments happen, right? We would realize that the karma of that which is conscious is, think of it, there's a system and it's like we're 10% conscious of a system that's 100% unconscious, right? It's like what would be the difference of the karma of like 10% consciousness, 20% consciousness, and whatnot, right? I'm trying to say that the more we experience reality, the more we realize our power is simultaneously being as our attention moves. You know, it's like attention and existence being an instant, but in that instant many moments can suddenly pop out. You know, it's like the brain is behaving like the Big Bang. You know, that's why I theorized it. if the mind has a better way that it can see something happen, then in some sense the option, the possibility is there. Sometimes when I look at life, I get bored of like how science fiction, like somebody watches a science fiction film and looks at 2022 and be like, wow, we're so behind. But sometimes I wonder, where would that innovation and vision to live in an unknown world arise? And it's kind of like a creature that can trust its moment is a creature that has given itself an opportunity to be the whole power of the moment. There is the most beautiful thing I could tell people about all the, I think, metaphysical experiences I've had in this lifetime so far, is that I have realized there comes a point where deep down in man's psychology, he doesn't know why the self is in the void and is seeking. It's kind of bizarre, but it's like that when a person, let's say, mystically reverse engineers their psyche, they come to this point where they realize that a lot of their complex, let's say, psychological beliefs are actually subconscious reactions to how emotions became part of their identity when they were young. What I'm trying to say is that when a person notices the unknown, it's like that's being conducted through an unknown viewer. Like if the moment was divided between the observed and the observer, it's like I'm saying the observed is being said known by an unknown observer. The mind is doing something that is causing it to think that it is a specific image. It's like matter wanted to be an image in an abstract space. Or deep down existence was just scenes to an, let's say, higher dimensional film. All I know is that when I considered mortality on Earth, I asked myself, why are human beings here on Earth for a limited time, and what is the greatest value that human intelligence can contribute? What is the greatest way that the human species can reassemble? A new vision, a sort of, it's as if human beings could not agree on any of their past beliefs, so that remains the only thing that remains is the future. It's as if we need to paint such a big picture for everybody on the planet of what humanity wants to do and where it wants to go, that all the unnecessary wars and sufferings will stop immediately. It's as if we were a species that had an expectation to become a species that in some sense, imagine we wanted to build sky cities, we wanted to build interstellar cities. Humanity had created advanced AI that was going all over the universal sector, checking out planets and making them inhabitable, right? Really what it is like the human being has a test, right? And the test is the test of continuity. Because we're mortal, life has a precious journey sort of value, right? But if we were immortal beings, then the scenario and game would be different, right? It's as if all those people who are trying to get enlightened, it's because they haven't realized there is something here that never had to play that game. It's kind of like, what would an eternal being do? And my realization was that what would from eternal stillness, there has come projections of temporary movement, but it's actually an eternal movement. Man is a completed being. In the future there would be the legend of the advanced human being. And it's not going to be like Superman, or like something like that, right? The advanced human being, is another way of saying a sort of immortal, natural journey. We are that part of nature that has dared, that has been so bold, that it's like mankind shouted to the jungles that we are staring at the stars, And civilization was born as a sort of, holy grail of the lesser species. Human beings are those creatures that on a rock where all creatures are behaving in accordance to their environment. We stepped out of our environment, and our minds stepped out of the outer environment that we perceived. It's like the person noticed their body, but usually we say my body, right? This is the issue with language. As long as human beings have a use for language, they cannot be materialistic beings. It's just the nature of it, what stories did to this creature that was just living in accordance to its environment. It's like civilization is an unnatural step into the nature of another dimension, right? Something caused us to want to see something more out of the moment. I call this urge, this is where every human being's principle, universal philosophy arises from. Most people are trying to solve their problem, let's say, they're trying to journey through this life, not realizing that the information age has a value, but there is something going on in this world that the moment it goes beyond subjectivism, then there is no meaning you can give it, and you'll suddenly come to where I am now, where I am staring at the unknown earth, the unknown world. And this unknown world is so supreme because it is simultaneously being the infinite potential of reality, and at the same time it is being where nothing lives. It's as if there's something very, I don't know how to call it, but it's like humanism is an incredible roller coaster ride, but the theme park is so bigger than the human experience. I have had visions of what an advanced civilization would look like in the future. And these inner visions were ones where, to me, they were equivalent to like a divine experience. It was as if my mind stepped ahead of itself, and it stepped so ahead of itself that not only had it been content with its non-existence, but it had the audacity, it had the some sort of something happened where I saw a way the future. It's kind of like when you get a vision of the future, a part of you wonders if that's actually present now. Imagine there were parallel universes, parallel Earths right now. If all human beings suddenly accepted infinite parallel universe theory, okay, it would be as if human beings would no longer have an opinion. The person would be like, it's like, imagine somebody comes and says, yo man, I'm spiritual, and the other person would say in some sense, that's nothing, man. I have so many infinite parallel lives that 100% in a bunch of those lives I'm, a spiritual being or whatever, right? And what is really going on here is that it's actually an unknown space. Even though we identify ourselves based on our body, but really how the mind appears, it's a sphere of presence, of attention. This is really what the mind is. The mind is how space is noticing what's in it. The species has to have such incredible tolerance, right? Like when I think about the future generations, I'm like 100% they're gonna be seeing all of our blind spots. They're gonna see all the ways we could have lived and didn't, you know? The opportunity for consciousness to be like, okay, now I'm in an unknown world. Now the eyes find the moment again. And now the pilot enters the fearless future. We will experience a fearless humanity, a humanity that is so conscious of all the possible dimensions that reality can happen, that its ignorance is reduced. It's kind of like a vision of the future that is so grand. You know, imagine a giant just landed on Earth. You know? It's like the feeling of the world having a greater presence. We usually have this view the world isn't alive. The world is just geometry in space. Just shapes that are here. But if something beyond the archetype that is choosing to claim the moment, like one eventually reaches a point through the yogic perspective where they begin to see it doesn't matter how they're being an individual, it doesn't matter how the cosmos is collectively happening. On some level, nature cannot doubt itself because it is being it's being the potential of what can be. You know, it's as if doubt is doubt is simplification, but trust usually invites the new dimensions. You know, the person's like, okay, I'm alive once, I get one lifetime. Imagine the brain and the DNA is like an instrument, and every person is like a unique instrument. We have one lifetime to truly see how advanced we could be in, and when we even forget to ask the question, the species has closed its eyes too soon. We are indirectly living for the greatness of the human species, and now Mr.Within is saying, we consciously live. Consciously live. That means imagine there's someone who doesn't believe in any story, idea, anything supernatural. It's as if believe in the spirit of your species is continuity. You know, a person thinks that spirituality means that the person has to be something different than what they are, you know. But spirituality is just realizing there's different modes and different settings to one's way, to one's own state of mind and attention. There is something unknown here, dear viewers. There is something that no common sense can touch. Something that means it's like something beyond our senses. Of course doesn't make sense, but it doesn't mean experience cannot receive. The texture of our minds, it's kind of like subjects are hovering in an invisible room. Like if I tell the viewers right now to imagine, I don't know, imagine like this glowing cube, let's say light blue cube, you know. Like the person can imagine it, but where are you imagining it? It's like an invisible room. The mind is like another type of world overlaid on the world. It's like an experiential substance is overlaid upon an existential substance. You know, as much as I can move my body, I'm also aware of my body. And when I ask where is my body to my own mind, I notice that it goes beyond the language threshold. The language threshold is a concept I've termed, where we suddenly notice that there are experiences that language has not, we don't even have the words for yet. You know, there's so many things happening here where the silent observer is like a very advanced multidimensional being, but the vocal observed mover is in some sense like limited to the conditions. You know, it's like 8 billion eyes looking at like the edge of the sky, right? And we're like, what's the meaning of life? It's like there's an unknown world here, and we're looking for the meaning of life. You know, the purpose of life is, to some degree, the advancement in all fathomable, conceivable conscious dimensions. There's a very important psychologist by the name of Carl Jung, and he says, if you do not make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is what the fantasy of civilization 1.0. I'm trying to bring civilization 2.0, but what I'm saying, like, this world is such a master class level of theater. That means really, you know, what the psychologist can't say directly, you know, is that every person's mind is how their experiences have created a theater of the world. Consciousness is temporarily performing in an eternal appearing space of a changing cosmos, you know, changing world. Like, the concept of the world is so divine that it's kind of like where the self has always been. There has never been a moment from the beginning of our birth that we have never been in the world. Do you know what I'm saying? It's as if dimensions begin to form, and human beings open their eyes as new players to an ancient game, each claiming that they are in their own modernity, not realizing that each generation of human beings is tasked with not just acquainting itself with its own generation, but wondering about what human beings have not thought of before. You know, there's so many unknown angles, there's so many new ideas that have not been found yet. An advanced life is present, but, you know, what story do we live through? I think it's close to like 2 degrees here in Etobicoke, Canada, where I'm doing this talk. You know, and it's like there's a multidimensional world here, and man is suffering based on specific singular dimensions. You know, the most incredible approach we human beings can have to human psychology is to treat it like an unknown mechanism, an unknown event. You know, it's like the world is an unknown event. It's something that's just happening, but at the same time, our mind is a receiver of this unknown event. That means consciousness is this being that its nature turns the unknown into known by its access to view. Consciousness, the power that our intelligence has, guys, whoever's listening, you know, dear species, you know, it's as if this intelligence that we have is by its nature imbued with the ability of converting the unknown to the known. We are the divinity in the moment. We are the converter of unknown into known, and then known into unknown into known into unknown. And Hegel saw a view of this in a different sense. It's called Hegel's dialectical process. The mysteries of the world are more important than emotional satisfaction. There's something our species can do that can make everything so incredible that any emotional judgment to not do it is like missing out on all the different emotions it could be. There will come the multidimensional renaissance of psychology on this planet. Human beings will realize that the more information our minds access, the more ways we are pushed into being beings that instantly master classifying things. That means the psychology of the future will have faster and faster classification speed. Human being, it's going to be easier for the future generations to be minds. We are human beings alive now. To some degree we have been minds, but it's like the responsibility of nature and its infusion with its own unnatural karma. So what it is that, to make it simple, I have taken this strategy that pretty much it's like I don't have any preference of a story to life, but for me it's like this presence and this potential of being. And the potential of being is like, the greatest performance in the void. That means what is the most advanced way that 8 billion creatures on a planet can behave. And when we forget to ask questions like this, we forget that we have a future. Sometimes when I give these talks, I feel the eyes of all those unborn people in the future. It's as if they're all staring at me. It's like that's the power of living, a consciousness finding itself present in the moment. It's considering a tunnel, an experiential tunnel, to its past, and the future is as if the potential of the world is watching you. The greatness that has never been seen on Earth is like awaiting you. And so what would the species do? We have feared emptiness because we've been like, we have no choice. The biological body's like a candle. And what's the value and glow of this candle? This is the tragedy of human life in the middle of our subjective theater. We have forgotten that we are very unknown but yet advanced living beings. We are like definitely the most advanced species on Earth. We have the privilege of being that conscious view. And so, as the most advanced species in the natural world, there comes the innate responsibility to advance towards greater archetypes. What has happened is that the idea of a self was samsara. The moment the person's mind had been an idea, that's the moment where suffering could be connected through storylines. But when a person realizes it's not the self, it's that whatever idea they have on their moment of being is just being. The ultimate simplicity. There's a simplicity by choice, but then mysticism is like a moment is becoming simplified in a way. It's like truth entered the room as if it had never left it. The species is waking up from language worship, and it's going to realize language is a tool. And this whole time, subjective senses of self have been equivalent to like the Iron Man suit, you know. And man's mind is another way of saying we have been born as a biological entity, but we have awakened into a subjective character in a story. We see the mind. It's like our consciousness appears, but our body is born. You know. And I feel that the reason life is so ingeniously, nature is so ingenious, that in just the cycle of human life, it has kind of created a system where the human being can never forget its multidimensional presence. And the way I'll tell you is because we experience the conscious waking state, we experience dream states, and we experience deep sleep. And that's kind of like nature telling us that we're not just the mind. But potential of being continues, you know. It's like consciousness is like, do I exist or not? But then realizing in deep sleep there is no doubt, no such thing as doubt, you know. But when the person wakes up, an archetype is engaging the world. The energy of the moment is doing something before it returns to deep sleep. It's like we like what the psyche is, the mind is we enter the conscious waking world, we log into the world, and the character has an ability, right? And also vision. And what really wisdom means is to attempt to see things as they are rather than as our inner realms want them to be, you know. Tony Stark was not the Iron Man suit, but when he was in it, he was an incredible superhero. Similarly, human beings are not their thoughts, but when they are in the conscious waking state, you can be an incredible thought on earth, you know. An incredible vision of reality. The value of us being different is because we get to see a world that nobody else can, and it's the task of 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere who have an inner realms. Everybody has their own inner realm, but we're in the same outer realm, and creativity is how much of the inner reality we want to release, you know. Why did Einstein think imagination was important? Why do theories have a value? Human beings are not just behavioral entities. Like, determinism is too easy, you know. You know, all lazy philosophers can, in some sense, you know, be determinists. It's so easy. You know, it's like the person, something happens to the person, and the person's like, man, it's just, that's what it is. It's like, but on some level, what caused the event? It's like consciousness wondering, why am I here? And then realizing that attention has an ability to position itself. The world is like information endlessly updating the storylines that are subjectively our lives, but objectively there's a silence to how the whole world moves at once. So the strategies of unknown intelligence is that you realize all you can do with the unknown is trust it. You know, the purpose of the soul is to trust the world. Similar in the Abrahamic tradition, God is watching man, and what faith is like man being like, all right, world that already knows how to happen, I'll trust you, right? Because in reality, what trust is kind of like what branch a bird chooses to land on, you know. An advanced humanity awaits. Rise, mankind, rise.